What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And as a lot of you guys heard, the California Department of Corrections decided yesterday that they were going to slam all level 3 and level 4 yards in the state because of increased violence, right? They said in their statement that it's due to increased violence against staff and against other inmates. I had said on my live yesterday that I thought it was a ridiculous move. It's not going to do anything to stop the violence. A lot of you guys will remember that there was a lockdown earlier on March 8th, right? And that was when they locked down all the level 4s. And so I'm going to run through kind of a list of some homicides. Salinas Valley, or at least portions of Salinas Valley, have now decided to go on hunger strike. They've made a formal declaration of that. I have that declaration here, and I will read it to you guys so that you see what it says. But just a little context for this, right? To make sure that we're kind of on the same page as we're thinking about what's going on in the California Department of Corrections. I made some notes. And on March 8th of this year, they locked down all the level 4 yards, right, in CDCR, and said that they were going to disable the communication on the tablets. Now, they didn't actually end up doing that during that lockdown, but they did take visits, right? And that's really the core of what we're getting at here, is taking people's visits and taking people's access to communicate with their loved ones. I think it's particularly cruel to do that when Father's Day is right around the corner. So I'll get to that in a second, but let's run through some of these incidents. So they go lock down all the level 4s on March 8th. March 14th, Wasco 187. For those that don't know, 187 is a penal code for murder, and so that's what we're going to call it so that I don't get the video flagged. March 18th, Salinas Valley attempted 187 on staff. That was S&Y. April 4th in Mill Creek 187, that's S&Y. April 5th, Tehachapi 187, that's S&Y. April 8th, Salinas Valley 187, that was not S&Y. That was on a GP, and that was right after they were coming off of that March 8th lockdown, right? That happened in the day room. April 26th, High Desert 187. I don't remember the standings of those people. April 26th, also, so same day, Kern Valley, attempt on staff. That was S&Y. April 27th, Lancaster 187. That's S&Y. May 21st, Vacaville, attempt on staff. That was S&Y. Also on May 21st, Kern Valley 187. I don't remember, to be honest. Also on May 21st, that was a busy day in the department. Mill Creek 187, that's S&Y. June 2nd, Lancaster, attempt on staff. 2, actually. One guy attacked staff with a weapon. Another staff responded, and he blasted them too. So that happened in Lancaster. That's S&Y. June 6th, the next day, Kern Valley 187. I don't remember the details. June 9th, Lancaster, another attempt on staff. So a week after the last one, still S&Y. High Desert State Prison on June 10th, 187. I don't recall. And then now here we are on June 13th, and they're locking down all the level 3s and level 4s. That's a decent amount of bodies, man. What is that? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 homicides since the last statewide lockdown of high security yards. It didn't make a difference. It didn't make a difference. Most of those bodies dropped on the S&Y. And the reason I point that out is because that is an unstructured environment, right? You can't really have a conversation about what happens over there because it's just a bunch of goof troops, right? And I'm not saying that to put anybody down. I'm just saying it's a weird space where weird stuff happens, and you got a lot of people on a lot of medication. You got people that are using violence to get transferred to other prisons. It's weird, Holmes. It's weird, right? And so it's hard to have an intelligent or constructive conversation about what happens on the S&Y, because even half the people on the S&Y probably don't know why things are happening over there. It's the nature of that environment. But let us not forget that that is entirely a creation of CDCR. The California Department of Corrections designed and built and filled the S&Y yards, and made them incredibly dangerous so that people who really do just want to program, they don't have weird charges, they just don't want to be involved in the activities, they're trying to get their date, they're tired, they whatever reasons, hung up their gloves, now have to endure all these, shenanigans. But it's a separate conversation. But I just want to make sure we're clear that the SNY is a different environment in the California Department of Corrections. And it is, again, not something you can have an intelligent conversation about because there's not a lot of intelligence used over there. And so that's where most of this violence is happening. But these yards that are getting locked down, these are essentially all the GP yards left in the state of California are now on lockdown. I might be missing a level 2 here or there, but for the most part, all the actives, if you will, right, to use a common phrase these days, are now slammed because of this violence. But where is most of this violence happening? And all the violence towards staff thus far is happening on the SNY, or EOP, hot med people in Vacaville, whatever. I kind of lump all them together. The not actively involved folks. So again, this last lockdown didn't do anything. It didn't stop anything. CDCR taking visits in advance of Father's Day, and then we'll get into the Salinas Valley stuff and some of the particulars about what's going on over there, and I'll get to this document. I don't want to make this a really long video, and this is much later than I really ever post content. But I wanted to get this out there, right, for you guys to see it. Hopefully other channels pick up on it. Obviously, the fellas that are going on the hunger strike want this information to get out there, right? It's not, they're not doing it in secret. The whole goal is to get attention to what they're experiencing, and we'll get to that. There are a lot of guys in prison who are fathers who the only time they see their kids during the year is on Father's Day, right? The baby's mom lets the grandma take them up, whatever. And that is meaningful. The California model, right, and the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation says that having contact with your family and connections to the streets and pro-social relationships is all a part of the rehabilitation process. It's encouraged. That's the point of the tablets, right, is to foster that communication with the outside world in a monitored way, but to increase those relationships, increase those communications. And to a degree, it has done just that. And it has been a huge blessing to a lot of people that are incarcerated, no matter what kind of yard they're on, and to their loved ones and their families who really don't care what kind of yard they're on. So you do this and you say this, but then you kill visits before Father's Day when you have a lot of fathers incarcerated. I'm incredibly thankful, right, that I did not have kids before I went to prison. I can't imagine doing time as a father. And we can have conversations around, well, the father shouldn't be in prison or whatever, and that's a whole separate thing. The fact of the matter is there are a lot of fathers incarcerated, and a lot of them are trying to have a rapport with their children, and a significant number of them really only get to see their kids on Father's Day. And now CDCR saying, haha, joke's on you, never mind. Like, people make special trips. Families come from out of state to come see their fathers, to come see their sons, to some degree, for Father's Day. It is a thing, and it is meaningful. And CDCR is saying you can't do this now because of all this hoopla that's happening, when a vast majority of the hoopla is their manufactured issues. I can think of 4 or 5 people that have been killed just last year for being put on yards where they weren't supposed to be. And they told the staff, I can't be here, right? And the staff was like, hey, it's out of our hands. We can't move you. It's not the CO in the building's choice or decision. They got to answer to somebody and say, hey, man, sorry, I can't move you. And they wind up getting their wind took, because they shouldn't have been on an active yard. And so that blood is on CDCR's hands, and again, a lot of it is EOPs and JCATs and SNYs, and that's on their hands too, because they allow those types of environments to fester and grow and be what they are. And then, yes, there's some house cleaning that happens amongst active groups. That is prison. People get blasted in prison. They were getting blasted when I was in there. They're still getting blasted. The rates of fatal, hits has definitely gone up in recent years. And there's reasons for that isn't a part of this video, but there's going to be a level of violence in there. What you're not seeing is riots. What you're not seeing is large scale racial tensions and gang tensions and that kind of stuff. And yet this is what's happening. And CDCR has said the other part of the California model is, hey, we're not going to do these blanket moves. We're not going to punish the many for the actions of the few. What the fuck is this? Like, this is exactly that. And in a particularly cruel way. And you add to that taking the tablets. Now, I was uncertain if they were going to cut off the tablets this time, because even though it says it in the memo, like I said, they didn't do it in the other lockdown. They just said they would. So in talking to some people that are incarcerated on active yards, as of this morning, early this morning, their tablets were still working, right? The tablets were still on. You were still able to communicate. And then particularly in Salinas Valley, this conversation about hunger strikes started, being put in the air. Obviously, the administration heard of it probably pretty quickly because there is a lot of telling that goes on active yards. And so they probably heard of it pretty quick. And all of a sudden, tablets started getting shut down. And the last I heard, most people's tablets weren't working. I think some people's were. My guess is it's just because it takes a while to go through and shut them all down. I don't know. They didn't have tablets when I was in prison. So, but I would expect that they're going to kill the communication aspect on the tablets. So now you have people who you can't visit in person physically. Now you can't even talk to your kid, right? You can't even email your kid, message them, have a video chat. Like the harm that causes to families, it's not the kid's fault that their dad's in prison. It's not the kid's fault that there's all this violence in prison. They just want to talk to their dad. And CDCR is saying no. These women want to just get at their husbands. And now they're saying, no, it's not the women's fault. It's not the family's fault, right? And for the most part, it's not the fault of 90+% of the people that are out there on those yards, of the people affected. Most of them are not running around catching bodies. Now, you do have some people that are catching multiple bodies that have become institutional serial killers. And yet they still get to walk around on the yard and do their thing. I don't understand that. I don't get the logic and the reasoning behind that. I'm not pro law enforcement. I'm not pro slamming people down. I'm not pro incarcerating people or anything else. I'm not pro violence in prison, unless you got weird charges and there's a lifer that kind of wants to do the world a favor, then so be it. Salute to them. But I'm not in favor of any of that stuff. But the truth is, if you're ending people's lives left and right, like, you got to stop being allowed to hang out with other people in prison, right? That's common sense. And in the game of cops and robbers, if you're going to beat a robber, the cop's going to beat a cop, and vice versa. There's an understanding that your actions come with consequences. And you should not expect to be able to just run around and take people's wind and still be out on the yard and having a job and going full draw at Canteen. Like, that's just ridiculous. And CDCR's allowing that to happen, though, right? They're letting these people stay out there, and then they're punishing everybody because some of those people are nutting up and doing what they've been doing over the last several years in prison to begin with. Like I said, it's particularly cruel. It doesn't make any sense. There's no rational reason for it except that CDCR wants more violence. They want more aggression. They want to stir the pot more. And I don't know if it's for budget reasons so that they can turn around and complain and say, look, man, we need millions of more dollars. I know that was an incentive when I was doing time. I don't know if they're just mad at their frontline officers and they're like, hey, screw it. Let's, put them on a chopping block, because that's the staff that's going to face the consequence if things get violent. And I hope that it doesn't. I don't think the floor cops deserve to get blasted, right? It's not their call. They're not making these decisions. But wardens and administrators aren't walking around on the yard, not on the active yards, right? I mean, they're playing hacky sack on the S&Y apparently, but they're not walking around on the active yards for folks to get at them. And I've said many times before, as have others that have done time in California in particular, and I'm sure other states, Violence is the language of prison, right? And we can like it or not like it or wish it was different or whatever, but it's a fact that violence is the primary language in prison. You live out your grievances, you act out your grievances in violence. You apologize through violence, right? Like that's just how it works. And thankfully, cooler heads have prevailed, and this whole end to hostilities, there's a lot less violence between groups. There's more communication, and that's great. And salute to these guys in Salinas Valley that have decided to take the hunger strike route instead of the take your head off route. This is pretty responsible communication. But what is CDCR going to do, right? How are they going to respond? And are the other prisons going to follow suit? Because to the best of my knowledge, at this point, it's just in Salinas. And I will tell you, it's particularly offensive to people that earlier today, COs went around, and again, it's not their fault. They're just relaying a message and said, hey, and this is before the hunger strike conversation, but they said, we might go ahead and run visits for Father's Day weekend if your loved one is coming from farther than 300 miles away. Salinas Valley State Prison is in Soledad, California. And if you look at a map and you just look at driving directions, right? Straight line driving directions, 300 miles, if you put a 300-mile radius around Salinas Valley, that means anybody south of Redding is out of the picture, right? You're not 300 miles away. Redding is like 300 and some change from Soledad. And then going into Southern California, that's LA is less than 300 miles. It's like 200 miles from, maybe a little bit more. But Los Angeles is under 300 miles from Salinas Valley. Who the fuck's getting visits, right? Like a handful of people, if your people are coming from like San Diego, right? Or if they're coming from out of state. So that's almost offensive. It's insulting, right? Like, hey, man, we're going to give you your visits back, but only for this amount of people. And you're going to have to be able to prove that your visitors are coming from that far away. And I think that's what got people like, man, F you guys. And the hunger strike conversation started. And obviously, by this form right here, it has come to fruition. Again, I'm not aware of other prisons jumping on just yet. They may be. You guys let me know in the comments if you know. I would not be surprised to see other level 4s and level 3s, other active yards, basically, jump on this as well, because it's bullshit. It's all a bunch of bullshit. So I'll get into who's participating and who's not in Salinas Valley and maybe some of my thoughts of why after we read this. So incarcerated people at Salinas Valley State Prison, to whom it may concern. Subject: formal declaration of hunger strike and protest against systemic violations by CDCR at Salinas Valley State Prison. We, the incarcerated individuals housed in Salinas Valley State Prison, formally declare the beginning of a peaceful hunger strike effective June 13th, 2025, which is today. This action arises in response to persistent and unlawful practices by the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, including the use of indiscriminate lockdowns, deprivation of rehabilitative and constitutional rights, and collective punishment of the incarcerated population. This protest is not rooted in defiance, but in our firm demand that CDCR adhere to its obligations under the U.S. Constitution, California Penal Code, and Title 15 of the California Code of Regulations. The Title 15 is essentially the Bible, and I don't mean that in a sacrilegious way, but that is the rule book for all things related to the California Department of Corrections. Legal and factual basis for protests. A, prolonged and arbitrary lockdowns. CDCR continues to impose indiscriminate, prolonged lockdowns on the entire yard population in response to isolated incidents directly stemming from the decisions of CDCR and the actions of its employees or vague reports of potential violence. These lockdowns confine individuals to their cells for excessive periods without any individualized threat assessment or due process, in violation of basic procedural fairness, contravene the Eighth Amendment, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment as recognized in Madrid v. Gomez. I found it pretty cool that they were using Madrid v. Gomez because I was using that in filing my 602s and habeas petitions way back in the 90s. And so Violate CDCR's own operational guidelines by extending beyond reasonable timeframes without adequate justification or oversight. These collective actions punish all, regardless of individual conduct, and erode trust in institutional fairness and rehabilitation. B. Suspension of visitation rights. CDCR has suspended all in-person visitation for Level 3 and Level 4 prisons, a clear violation of the Title 15, which guarantees a minimum of 2 days of visiting per week, one of which shall be on a Saturday or Sunday. Visiting shall be for a minimum of 8 hours per day. The blanket cancellation of visits without individualized assessments or compelling penological justification undermines family integrity and violates our right to maintain crucial community and legal connections. This also contradicts U.S. Supreme Court precedent in Overton v. Becerra, which emphasized that visitation can only be limited based on legitimate and individualized safety concerns. Revocation of phone and canteen access. The shutdown of phone access and suspension of canteen services during these lockdowns is particularly egregious. These actions cut off communication with family and legal representatives, create food insecurity by removing access to essential supplemental nutrition, are not reasonably related to institutional safety. These conditions lack any clear nexus to legitimate security concerns and appear designed to exert pressure through deprivation, a form of retaliatory punishment forbidden by law. See Rose versus Chapman. Additionally, Title 15 mandates inmates shall be permitted to shop at the canteen at least once per month, provided they have sufficient funds and privileged group status permitting such activity. And I'll get into some of the canteen stuff at Salinas Valley lately, but CDCR's failure to meet this obligation further compounds the harm caused by these unnecessary restrictions. Objectives of the hunger strike. Our protest is intended to secure compliance with existing legal and constitutional rights, not to create unrest. We respectfully demand the following. 1. Immediate end to collective punishment and indiscriminate lockdowns. 2. Restoration of visitation in accordance with the Title 15. Reinstatement of phone access. 3. Reinstatement of phone access during any security evaluations unless specific restrictions are applied based on individual conduct. 4. Immediate operation of canteen services as required by the Title 15. 5. Adherence to due process and humane treatment standards as guaranteed by the 8th and 14th Amendment. Third point, call to oversight and action. We call on the following parties to review and act upon these ongoing rights violations. Legal advocates and civil rights attorneys, oversight entities such as the Office of the Inspector General and Office of the Ombudsman, members of the California Legislature, journalists, prison rights organizations, and the concerned public. That is you guys. We urge these bodies to intervene, investigate CDCR's repeated failure to follow its own regulations and constitutional obligations, and support the restoration of humane and lawful conditions within the California prison system. Respectfully, on behalf of the incarcerated population of Salinas Valley State Prison. So there is their memo, right? And their announcement of what's going on. I respect it. I support it. In terms of the canteen stuff, you know, the guys on what is it, C Lower, they haven't had canteen in like a month, right? They didn't have visits in Salinas this past weekend because they found some knives. It's prison. You're going to find knives, right? Again, if you look at this list, it's not like people are getting blasted every week at Salinas Valley, right? Or any other active yard. Now, you got back-to-back incidents in places like Lancaster, Mule Creek, Tehachapi, but shit, look at the population you're dealing with, right? Like, if anything, lock them down. You know, if you're going to do it to anybody, at least target the population of people that is causing the most harm, or perhaps shake up the system so that you don't have those unstructured environments. But again, that's a whole other conversation. The point is, they've been depriving them of canteen. They've been messing with their visits. They've been doing this at Salinas for indiscriminate reasons for a long time. When I was in Salinas Valley, the COs, the administration was acting a fool. And in my time, there was a lot of COs involved in that foolish stuff. And unfortunately, it got to the point to where a demo had to be laid. And during my time there, the Southerners on the 180 side knocked down some cops, right? The kitchen workers on their way out in the morning, they're going around escorting, and then they decided to express their displeasure. But that was after a lot of other efforts, right? And a lot of warning. And so That stuff is possible. That stuff has happened in the past. That stuff has happened in Salinas Valley in the past. And there's nothing stopping that from happening in the future except the fact that these dudes don't want that smoke, right? They don't want to get snatched up off the yard. They don't want to get indicted. They don't want more time. They don't want the consequences that will come with that. But at some point, the scales will tip. At some point, the harm that you're experiencing outweighs the sacrifice of taking things further. And I would strongly encourage CDCR to take heed to the peaceful protest, right? And again, I'm not advocating for violence. I'm not suggesting it. I hope that it doesn't come to that. I don't think anybody wins in that situation. But folks get frustrated. Folks get irritated. And you're messing with some of the most important things to individuals that are doing time, no matter where they're from or who they hang out with or what they're in prison for. This is fundamental shit, man, right? Canteen and visits, and mostly the visits, you know. I think it's interesting that they're choosing to kick off this lockdown and made that decision very quickly when they haven't been to Canteen in a month, you know. So this wasn't one of those cases of, hey, we're going to gear up and get ready. This was, oh, you announced the lockdown yesterday? Well, we're announcing a hunger strike today. People are mad, and props to the dudes that are incarcerated for doing the best that they can to express that in nonviolent fashion, but also maybe in a manner that will get them some relief. Now, who's participating? You guys know that on C facility it's split, right? And so half of C facility is Northerners, Southerners, blacks, whites, and others. The other half of C facility is Bulldogs, New Flowers, others, and blacks. They're both GP yards. They're both active yards, right? They're both main lines. But obviously some of those groups on opposite sides of the fence don't really get along with each other. And so the Bulldog side of the yard, right? The Raza on that side, put it that way, have decided to not participate. The blacks and the others over there are. The Raza's not. And I don't speak for them. I haven't talked to them, but I would imagine that some of the reasoning is all the hoopla that's been going on, specifically at Salinas Valley in recent months, you know, like the last year in particular. I mean, it's been ongoing, but you guys remember there was an incident in the visiting room, right? And there was these different narratives being pushed. And so I think people feel like, my guess is the feeling is, hey, you wouldn't do this for us, right? Like we lose our canteen all the time. And if we asked you guys to hunger strike for us, you laugh at us. Like you don't even want us here and you don't want to go to visit with us. And you like, so no, the fact that you guys are struggling, we're struggling too, but we don't want to partner with you in addressing that. I'd be curious if this became statewide, if that would change some people's minds. I think there's just a lot of bad blood and ill feelings when it comes to Salinas Valley and C facility in particular. That's been that way for a long time. So, you know, it is what it is, right? It's the 270 main line. What's that, B yard? So B yard and C lower are participating in this hunger strike. That is a sizable population of people, you know, but A facilities, S and Y, and D facilities like down in EOP, JCAT, you know, people. So I'm sure they're not really participating. I don't know. Maybe the SOI is. I'm not sure. But I would assume that they're not. So this is what it is, right? They're on a hunger strike in Salinas Valley. Will other prisons follow suit? Who knows? If you guys want a copy of this, I can email it to you. Just email me, Joshua at thehomiehangout.com. And I encourage people to make videos about this, right? Make some videos, express your opinion. I'm curious. Leave me some comments. Let me know and let me know what you guys are hearing, and we'll go from there. Happy early Father's Day to all the fathers out there, whether you're incarcerated or not. My condolences for those whom this holiday hurts, you know, and my prayers are with you guys. I'm gonna enjoy my time with my kids who are over here sitting on the couch waiting for me to finish this video. So salute to everybody, man. Help others move with excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it. Help your community because they need you. And And stay tuned. Make sure you got your notification bell on because I'm still doing content and you're not gonna want to miss it. Take care.